The South China Sea is a vast and strategically important body of water in Southeast Asia. Stretching over 3.5 million square kilometers, it is one of the world's busiest and most contested maritime regions. Its sparkling blue waters and scattered islands may look peaceful from above, but beneath the surface lies a complex web of interests, resources, and rivalries that make this sea a focal point of global attention. The South China Sea is bordered by several nations including China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. Each of these countries has its own unique history, culture, and economic interests tied to the sea. The proximity of so many nations to this body of water has made it a crossroads of commerce, culture, and conflict for centuries. Beneath its surface, the South China Sea is believed to hold vast reserves of oil and natural gas. These untapped resources have the potential to transform the energy landscape not only for the region but for the world. The promise of energy independence and economic growth drives countries to stake their claims, fueling competition and sometimes confrontation. The race to control these resources is a major factor behind the ongoing disputes. The sea is also home to some of the world's richest fishing grounds. Millions of people across Southeast Asia depend on these waters for their daily livelihoods, catching fish that feed local communities and supply global markets. Overfishing and environmental degradation threaten these vital resources, making access to fishing grounds a matter of survival for many coastal populations. Beyond its natural resources, the South China Sea is a critical artery for international trade. It serves as a maritime superhighway, connecting the economies of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and beyond. The sea's shipping lanes are among the busiest in the world, carrying goods that touch nearly every aspect of modern life. Every year, an estimated $3 to $5 trillion worth of goods, including oil, electronics, raw materials, and consumer products, pass through these waters. The uninterrupted flow of trade through the South China Sea is essential for the economic stability of not just Asia, but the entire world. Any disruption here could send shockwaves through global supply chains, affecting prices and availability of goods everywhere. Control over these vital shipping routes is a powerful tool. Whoever holds sway over the South China Sea can influence the movement of goods, energy supplies, and even military forces. This makes the region a strategic prize, coveted by regional powers and watched closely by the international community. However, the South China Sea is not just a highway for commerce, it is also a flashpoint for international tension. In recent years, confrontations between China and the Philippines have drawn global attention. Naval vessels from both countries often find themselves in close proximity, leading to tense standoffs and raising the risk of accidental conflict. Both China and the Philippines lay claim to significant portions of the sea, citing historical records, international law, and national interests. These overlapping claims have created a complex and potentially volatile dispute, with each side determined to defend its perceived rights and sovereignty. To truly understand the stakes, it's important to look at the historical context, the legal arguments presented by each side, and the recent events that have shaped the current standoff. International courts, diplomatic negotiations, and high-profile incidents have all played a role in shaping the narrative and influencing the actions of the countries involved. The South China Sea dispute is not just a regional issue, it has far-reaching consequences for international law, maritime security, and the balance of power in the Asia-Pacific region. The involvement of outside powers, such as the United States and its allies, adds another layer of complexity as they conduct freedom of navigation operations and call for peaceful resolution based on international law. As China asserts its growing influence and the Philippines seeks to protect its sovereign territory, the world watches closely. The outcome of this dispute will shape the future of the region and set precedents for how similar conflicts are resolved elsewhere. The hope is for a peaceful resolution, but the risks of escalation remain ever present, making the South China Sea one of the most important and closely watched regions on the planet. China's claim to the South China Sea is deeply rooted in a long-standing historical narrative, one that stretches back through centuries of maritime tradition and national identity. For many in China, the connection to these waters is not just a matter of modern politics, but a legacy passed down through generations, woven into the very fabric of the nation's history. Beijing asserts that it has exercised sovereignty over the region for centuries, dating back to powerful dynasties such as the Han and Ming, whose ships are said to have patrolled, explored, and controlled these waters. These dynasties established trade routes, built navigation beacons, and left behind records of their presence, reinforcing the idea that the South China Sea has long been an integral part of China's maritime domain. Chinese officials and scholars point to a wealth of historical records, ancient maps, and maritime artifacts as evidence of their enduring presence and influence in the area. These include centuries-old navigation charts, official documents, and relics recovered from shipwrecks, all of which are presented as proof of continuous Chinese activity and administration over the islands and waters of the South China Sea. Central to China's claim is the so-called Nine-Dash Line, a sweeping demarcation that encompasses a vast swath of the South China Sea. This line, which appears as a series of dashes looping around the sea, is at the heart of the ongoing dispute and serves as a visual representation of China's asserted historical rights. The Nine-Dash Line first appeared on Chinese maps in the 1940s during the Republic of China era and has since been adopted by the People's Republic. It encircles nearly 90% of the South China Sea, including hundreds of islands, reefs, and submerged features, many of which are also claimed by other countries. For China, this line is more than a cartographic boundary. It is a symbol of inherited territorial waters, passed down from previous generations and enshrined in national memory. China argues that the Nine-Dash Line represents its historical territorial waters, a claim that is deeply embedded in the country's educational materials, public discourse, and diplomatic statements. The narrative emphasizes continuity, portraying China as the rightful steward of these waters, responsible for their protection and development. However, this sweeping claim is hotly contested by international law and by neighboring nations such as Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, all of whom have their own historical ties and legal arguments regarding the region. Critics argue that the Nine-Dash Line lacks a clear legal basis under modern international law and directly violates the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, which China has ratified. According to UNCLOS, maritime entitlements are determined by proximity and specific legal criteria, not by historical claims alone. UNCLOS establishes clear guidelines for defining territorial waters, exclusive economic zones, and the rights of nations within these maritime areas. It aims to prevent conflicts by providing a legal framework for resolving disputes and ensuring freedom of navigation for all. Despite mounting international criticism and legal challenges, China has continued to assert its claims in the South China Sea. The country has engaged in large-scale island-building activities, transforming reefs into military outposts equipped with runways, radar systems, and missile batteries. Chinese naval patrols are a regular presence, and civilian vessels are often deployed to reinforce territorial assertions. These actions have significantly heightened tensions with neighboring countries, leading to diplomatic standoffs, legal battles, and even occasional confrontations at sea. The situation has raised serious concerns among regional and global powers about China's growing assertiveness, the risk of escalation, and the future stability of one of the world's most vital maritime regions. The Philippines, in contrast to China's historical claims, bases its position on international law. This approach is rooted in a desire to uphold a rules-based international order, where disputes are settled not by force or historical narratives, but by universally accepted legal frameworks. The Philippine government has consistently emphasized that its claims are not only legitimate, but also in line with the principles that govern relations between nations. Geographically, the Philippines is situated much closer to many of the disputed islands and maritime features in the South China Sea than China. This proximity strengthens Manila's argument that these areas naturally fall within its jurisdiction, as they are an extension of its archipelagic territory, and are vital to the livelihoods of its coastal communities. The Philippines argues that its claims to certain islands and reefs in the South China Sea are firmly grounded in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. This international treaty, ratified by both the Philippines and China, sets out the legal framework for maritime entitlements, including territorial seas, exclusive economic zones, and continental shelves. According to UNCLOS, Manila contends that its territorial waters extend 200 nautical miles from its coastline, forming what is known as an exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. Within this EEZ, the Philippines has sovereign rights to explore, exploit, conserve, and manage natural resources. This zone encompasses several key features within the disputed area, including the Spratly Islands and Scarborough Shoal, which are rich in marine biodiversity and potential energy resources. The Philippines maintains that these features are naturally formed land masses, not artificial structures, and are therefore entitled to their own exclusive economic zones and continental shelves under international law. This distinction is crucial, as it determines the rights to surrounding waters and resources. Furthermore, the Philippines emphasizes its deep historical and cultural connections to the disputed areas. For generations, Filipino fishermen have relied on these waters for their livelihoods, passing down traditional fishing practices from one generation to the next. These communities view the South China Sea not just as a resource, but as an integral part of their heritage and daily life. In recent years, however, China's actions, such as the large-scale construction of artificial islands complete with military installations and airstrips, have dramatically altered the landscape of the South China Sea. These activities have raised concerns not only about environmental damage, but also about the militarization of the region. The Philippines argues that the harassment of its fishermen by Chinese Coast Guard vessels, including the confiscation of catches and the use of water cannons, directly infringes upon its sovereign rights. These confrontations have created a climate of fear and uncertainty for Filipino fishing communities, threatening their traditional way of life and economic security. Despite these challenges, the Philippines has consistently sought to resolve the dispute through peaceful means. Manila has engaged in bilateral negotiations with Beijing, participated in regional dialogues, and, when necessary, turned to international arbitration to seek a fair and impartial resolution. In 2016, a landmark decision was handed down by an international tribunal in The Hague. The tribunal ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the Philippines, declaring that China's expansive 9-line claim had no legal basis under UNCLOS. This ruling was hailed as a victory for international law and a reaffirmation of the rights of smaller nations. However, China has rejected the tribunal's ruling, maintaining its historical claims and continuing its activities in the disputed waters. The standoff remains a major flashpoint in regional geopolitics, highlighting the ongoing struggle between adherence to international law and the assertion of power through unilateral actions. The South China Sea dispute between China and the Philippines has been marked by a series of recent clashes and incidents, highlighting the volatile and unpredictable nature of the situation. These encounters, often involving fishing vessels, Coast Guard ships, and maritime militias, underscore the potential for escalation and the ever-present risk of miscalculation in the region. One notable incident occurred in 2012 when Chinese vessels took control of Scarborough Shoal, a traditional fishing ground for both countries, after a tense standoff with Philippine vessels. China's subsequent control of the shoal and its construction of artificial islands in the vicinity have significantly raised tensions in the area. In recent years, there have been numerous reports of Chinese vessels harassing and intimidating Filipino fishermen operating in these disputed waters. These incidents often involve Chinese Coast Guard ships using water cannons, ramming fishing boats, or forcing them to leave the area entirely. Such actions have fueled anger and resentment among Filipino fishermen who rely on these waters for their daily livelihoods. The Philippines has repeatedly protested these actions, accusing China of violating international law and jeopardizing peace and stability in the region. Manila has sought to raise international awareness of the situation, seeking support from allies like the United States and other countries concerned about China's increasingly assertive behavior.